Hello, my name is Yanyun. I'm a visual artist, and today I'm your host for Artists at Home. In this segment of Artists at Home, I will be talking about using charcoal to create drawings with light and shadow. If you missed last week's segment on gestural drawings with charcoal, do check it out. In order to draw drawings with light and shadow, there are a couple of things that you need. You will need a piece of paper, you will need an object or something that you feel like drawing, you need an environment with one source of light. So for this arrangement, the light is coming from just behind you. You see that the light will come from this direction and the shadows are on this end. Other materials that you need a paintbrush. I like to use a fan brush, but you can use any big paintbrush. You will need this thing called charcoal powder. And if you don't have charcoal powder, all you have to do is take your charcoal stick and pound it into powder form. And the last thing you will need is a kneadable eraser. It's basically a kind of eraser that you can knead into any shape. One of the reasons I really like using charcoal is how much fun it is and how messy it is. But at the same time, you can also get a lot of interesting detail. And so it's a very, very flexible medium, and there's a large range of things you can do with it. So we're going to now look at the subject matter, and I'll break down a little bit the steps of what I'm looking at with you. So we're going to look at this arrangement, and the first thing you must consider is where the light is coming from. So in this case, the light is coming from this direction and it's coming in. So this side of the arrangement is brighter, like this side of the vase is brighter, and this side are all in shadow. But the darkest thing really is the leaves. They are way darker than anything else, while the brightest thing is the vase. So we know that the light is coming from this direction, coming on this side. So in the arrangement, where would the light be and where would the shadow be? Alright, so we're going to start. That's where the fun begins. You're going to take a big paintbrush, stuff it inside your charcoal powder, and you're going to cover the paper with a lot of charcoal. So here we go. It's going to get nice messy. We're going to do this. And it doesn't matter which direction. Just cover it with a layer of charcoal. Okay, so I want to do this rounded shape. Alright. Something like this. I'm going to dust off some stuff. Here we go. Okay, just now we were talking about how the light's coming from this direction. All the light shapes are on the right, and all the shadows are on the left. So we're going to use the kneadable eraser to draw instead of charcoal. So we're all going to put a lot of the drawing marks with the kneadable eraser on the right. So in this case, we're going to start like this. So this area, I see a flower, and it can be kind of basic for now. So there's a flower here, there's another one here. And of course, don't worry if you make a mistake, because this is charcoal, you can easily change it. I'm going to do another block shape here, followed by a big block shape here, because I want to draw this flower. And it's kind of like gesture drawing, except this time, we are using the kneadable eraser to bring out the lights. Now remember I talked about how the leaves are in shadow, so the flowers are the only ones that are bright, so I'm going to ignore the leaves at the bottom for now. Again, I'm going to use my gesture drawing that I learned last week. Just kind of build this big chrysanthemum that's right here. Kind of creating the shapes of the flag. And I have another one that's here. But this time it's in shadow, so we're not going to go very far with it. I just want to have these little bit of lights in the center because I don't want the big petals that catch a little bit of the light in the shadow side. So I'm just going to put a few strokes to sort of give us a sense. So the brightest thing should always be on the right. Meanwhile, things that are in the shadow should not be overemphasized. So just a few strokes here, that's good enough. Okay, then the brightest thing is the vase. So in this case, I'm going to use the kneadable eraser to block out the vase, but only half of the vase. Because only one side is facing the light. When your kneadable eraser gets dirty, you just have to knead it and then you can get to do more. Just kind of cleaning it up. So making sure that the vase is probably the most bright thing in the entire composition. Alright, so I would like to kind of soften certain edges, so I will blur off this edge here. Some edges don't need to be so sharp, so just soften it. You can also brush back on the light side and then use the eraser again, clean it up, clean up the edges. And these areas that are supposed to be in shadow, I'm going to dust it just so that it's not as bright as the stuff on the right. Meanwhile, I'm going to go back and take out more whites on the right side. So now you have this nice, bright area with lots of different strokes, as well as a big block for the vase. But what do we do with the darker areas now? This is where you need your charcoal again. Kind of going back to your gesture drawings last week, and we're going to put in some of the darker areas, but not everything. But we will start off with the darkest part, which is all on the left. So remember we had that big square here. So I'm going to put in center of the gerbera, which is a flower. Here, right in the shadows, right here. Some parts of the flowers here. Just to add emphasis, I'm going to bring in the leaves. Okay, there's another one here. Oops, I drew over it. So what I'm going to do later is I'm going to use the eraser again to block out the light. Blocking in, bringing emphasis. Yeah, so it makes use of the gesture drawings from last week, but this time with the emphasis of light and shadow. Now you might find that the lines that I'm using are really kind of different from the sort of feeling of the rest of the drawing, so don't worry, we're going to blur it out again with the brush. So if it's too rough or too sharp, you can always make it kind of blurry with the brush. Now I want to add a few lines to describe the petals up here, just for emphasis, so it has a nice feeling. If your background is black, like the clock, you can actually start to fill in the background. But I quite like this messy stroke, so I'm going to leave it as it is. But the vase is only drawn on one side, so I feel like it's important for me to just at least block in the other side. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make sure that it's the same on both sides. Kind of just draw a line so that it's symmetrical. Find the ends of it because the shadows on the floor are quite strong. Might just kind of soften it a little bit. And then, to make it come kind of forward, it's going to darken only a certain section of the background. And I'm using a very rough charcoal tool because I want it to look the same as the rest. I'm also going to block in a little bit of shadows on this side so that it shows that the flowers are not black, but rather they are a certain color but just darker. So I'm going to look at the silhouettes and sort of give it a little bit of emphasis. Again, if it's too much, just brush it off. This particular flower here is actually quite bright, so I'm going to block in a little bit more of the petals. But remember, it's still in shadow, so it cannot be too bright. It can't be brighter than the right side. But use the kneadable eraser as a drawing tool. Okay, just last few strokes. Again, I like to use what I was talking about last week, which is the lines to create movement. So I'm just going to put a few strokes here and there because it's a lot of fun to do it this way. Add a bit more shadows on this side. Kind of give it a bit more fuzz. And add in the last bits of light that I can see. So we have one here, a line here, a few extra strokes here. And you can also use the kneadable eraser to add the movement lines like your gesture drawing. That's right here. And because there's a huge contrast in this flower right here, I want to just bring it back in, but carefully, not too much. Of detail, because at this point I want this flower to be a little bit of the focus. So Just adding some emphasis right here to add contrast and detail, and then brush it a little bit too much. So just add a few more dark strokes down here just to add contrast to show that the shadow side has a dark backdrop, and there you have it. So just to do a quick recap, these were the steps that I took. I first used charcoal powder to paint all over the piece of paper to make it grey, and then paying attention to the object that I have in front of me and the light direction, I will use the kneadable eraser to put in all the light part of the arrangement. So in this case, all the lights are on the right and all the shadows are on the left. So I used the kneadable eraser to sort of draw in, like you learned last week with gestural drawing, all the light shapes in the arrangement. Thereafter, I would use the brush to blur out certain areas, or if something is too sharp, I would actually kind of soften it with a brush. Then I would use a charcoal to sort of draw in the darker shadows of the arrangement. Sometimes I would use it to create more depth by adding an area of dark. Other times I would actually use it to draw like gestural outlines of the leaves and the stems and certain shadowy parts, just to create more movement and dynamism in the drawing. And voila, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this segment where we use charcoal to create drawings that have light and shadow. Stay tuned next week for a different way of using charcoal, where we will be experimenting with the charcoal itself.